I'm Jenna Wolfe. That is the Hall of
Look
Fame.
who's
Cris
back.
Carter.
Happily married, back from vacation.
Don't knock over my stuff.
I won't. If I could, I'd get up and give you a hug.
Hey,
Welcome
we
back,
missed
man.
You. We missed you. Did you have fun?
On Friday.
Oh, thank you.
You were
We are
gone for a
back
long time.
together, back as a
First
group.
time in a couple, 3 weeks.
It's a long time that the three of us have been all back, and it's good to
It was
see
great.
you.
It was great.
Good.
Feel rested, ready to go.
Yeah?
Ready?
Let's do it. You ready to go to the combine, knock out some reps?
Oh man, come on, I can do that. I think I could probably throw up.
I think you could match what Orlando Brown's numbers were. The 40,
Not great.
the
I'll definitely-
225. I think you could,
225, he still might got me.
okay, but the 40, you think you could get him?
But that 40-yard dash he ran, when he stopped running, there was still some stuff moving. I mean, there was some action still going on.
All right, let's start with said combine. The NFL Draft held its annual prom this weekend in Indianapolis. That is the combine. Much like my prom, the goal was to show up, look your best, and then, run a solid 40-yard dash. I was doing that outside while everybody was inside dancing. Penn State running back SAQUON Barkley, boy, he got the memo. After bench pressing 29 reps and running a 4.40, reports are, as a result, he is, quote, firmly in the mix to be drafted #1 overall. Mind you, he'd be the first running back taken first since 1995. Was it Kajana Carter? Wasn't that in 1995?
Yes, absolutely.
What do you think, Cris? Is he worth the top pick in the NFL draft based on what you've seen of him last season and then what you saw him at the combine?
Well, this is the thing. He's been very, very consistent. He was a high achiever in high school, great athlete, multiple sports, track athlete, also a power lifter, very, very explosive. A lot of times you don't see those combinations as far as a guy who has that overall strength and has that overall athleticism, over a 40-inch vertical. I mean, it lets you, that coupled with the game tape. Because you can't just go to the combine and fall in love with the guy. You have to be like, man, this guy, has he been a consistent performer at every level? And he's been able to do that. In normal situations, you would think, okay, who's the best athlete? He's worthy of a first-round pick, unless it's a quarterback. Because if you can change your franchise by getting a quarterback, regardless of what talent, left tackle, running back, defensive end, there's no position like quarterback. So does he have the talent? Does he have the resume? Does he have all those things, intangibles, that he's an unselfish player? He is a team-first guy? Like all those things? Yes, but if you can get a quarterback that's going to be your franchise quarterback and turn your team around, the quarterback touches the ball every play. Now, given that we have Ezekiel Elliott, given that we got L. Bell in Pittsburgh, both of these guys came from the Big Ten. Them and Todd Gurley, these are the top 3 running backs in the NFL. Barkley came from the Big Ten. So if you look, does it transfer over? He returns kicks. He catches the ball out of the backfield. He's got great character on and off the field. Yes, he would be worthy of the #1 pick. If you were like, I don't know about the quarterbacks, yeah, take this kid because he, I believe, is a can't miss in the NFL.
You have to believe that there are no franchise quarterbacks in the draft if you need a quarterback, to take anything other than a quarterback at #1. So I know some people have questions about how good Barkley will be. Coach Mangini doesn't necessarily love him between the tackles. You and I saw a game against Ohio State where first play of the game, opening kickoff, takes it for a touchdown. Early in the game, has, I think, a 30-yard touchdown run, and then got shut down after that. I don't have those concerns. I think this guy is plug and play into the NFL instantly. Top 5 running back in the league. I believe that. But he's still not worthy of the #1 pick. Like, as great as Zeke has been, if you went back and redrafted, Zeke wouldn't go #1. You mentioned Todd Gurley. You went back to his draft. He wouldn't go #1. Why? There were franchise quarterbacks in that draft. Le'Veon Bell maybe would go #1, knowing what we know now. But that was the odd 2013 draft, where Eric Fisher was the #1 pick, and there was only one quarterback taken in the first round. It was E.J. Manuel, and nobody believed in the quarterbacks
And in 2013, the running backs had taken a back seat as far as would they be highlighted in offenses. Fullbacks were basically deleted from the offense, and running backs, it became more of, we're going to go by committee. Now, we've seen these younger running backs in franchise have gotten back to, okay, man, we can get back to an old style of football by handing one guy the ball 20 to 25 times.
The one other thing that I'll mention, because you said the quarterback touches the ball on every play, it's not just that. It's that if you draft the right quarterback in the top 10 or in the first round, certainly at #1, he's on your team for 15 years. Like, if you draft the right quarterback, we don't see quarterbacks go change teams ever if they're a true franchise quarterback. Running back, even if they're great, what's the career? 7 years? Like 8 years? And so for all those reasons, if you're Cleveland, a team, by the way, that has traded away the picks that became Carson Wentz and Deshaun Watson, them not taking a quarterback #1 seems crazy to me.
Well, when you have a guy like this, a running back's body, but also a sort of a wide receiver's body who had such an explosive day at the Combine, is there another guy in the league right now that he reminds you of, the skill set? Like, tell me a little bit about, like, why he's such a special player, why he's so good.
Well, I just believe because his overall character. If you talk about Joe Moorhead, the offensive coordinator at Penn State, he talks about, man, I go to this guy, he's like Bill Russell. He talks about the rest of the guy. What can I do for the rest of the team? We know that. He's explosive, special teams-wise. You don't have to train him. You kick the ball off in the NFL game, he is ready to play right now. As Nick said, plug and play. His ability out of the backfield. We saw him run a 4.4. I believe he's a lot faster than that. In his start at the Combine, he popped straight up. So he didn't have a great start. I believe in his pro day, he'll run in the 4.3. So that's a mismatch versus linebackers and safeties in space. We saw McCaffrey. We saw him with Carolina have a rookie year. Now, this guy is a better football player than him. So that's why right now, why you look at him and say, man, it's not a matter of looking at a player. If you look at his skill set that's transferable, and the top backs, what do? They're 3-down backs, which Barkley will be on the first day in the NFL.
I think they look at him, and the reason he's being discussed as the #1 overall pick is take what Alvin Kamara was able to do as a receiver and then add to that what we saw Zeke do as a runner. And I think people say that could be Saquon Barkley. And if you have Zeke's ability to run between the tackles and on the edges combined with Alvin Kamara's elite pass-catching ability, well, what you have is one of, if not the best running back in the league. And this is a position, more so than any other position in the league, that I think you can be the best as a rookie or as a second-year player. We've seen it the last few years from Gurley to Zeke. Leonard Fournette wasn't the best running back, but he was very good this year. Like, you can do it instantly. It's the type of thing that you said, CC, almost your general IQ, not that Barkley seems like a really smart guy, but it's the one position where your general IQ is almost the least meaningful because it's instincts. It's the position guys have been playing since they were 8 years old. Who's the best athlete? Make him the running back, give him the ball. Right.
And when we talk about instincts, talk about all the things, I did pull a name from my hat, and I know this is way up there, Marshall Faulk. When I look at a player and say, who could he be like? Marshall Faulk, when he was in the league, that's what I see Barkley in the comparison. Marshall came in as a little undersized, a little smaller than Barkley, but he evolved as one of the best 3-down backs, great mismatch against linebackers, his ability to recognize defense and everything. So that'd be a comparison that I would bring. My thing with Cleveland is because they hold the 1 and 4 pick, I don't think it would be bad for them to take him first because then you control more of the first round because the drop-off between him and the other running backs is huge. Then you can still get a quarterback at 4, but you take him away from the Giants and potentially Indianapolis or other teams who might try to trade up. So for me, I wouldn't be opposed to drafting him #1. And I believe you still get the quarterback at #4, and you have the 2 best offensive players in the draft added to the Cleveland Browns. I believe that helps them instantly.
Especially if you think that the talent pool for quarterbacks is pretty equal among the 3 or 4 that are up there.
Yeah, that to me is incredibly risky because even if you believe the Giants and the Colts aren't going to take a quarterback, someone could trade into that spot and take it. And if you're Cleveland and you have a quarterback you love, the idea that you would say, we're smarter than the rest of the league. We love this guy at 4, but no one's going to jump in front of us and take him at 2 or 3. Listen, I'm a gambler. That'd be a hell of a gamble to try to say we're going to get the best player at 1 and the best quarterback at 4. It's great if it works out, but if someone jumps in front of you...
Well, the other 2 teams with the Giants, they say they don't need a quarterback. Indianapolis have luck. They're not going to draft a quarterback. So this would be the time. It would be a more calculated risk. And you would control the draft if you're able to get those 2 players. That would be a breath of fresh air for the Cleveland Browns. And if you don't get the quarterback you like, you have the press conference, hey, man, this is the guy. We had this guy ranked highest because that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, yeah. and then they stay on this quarterback treadmill, unfortunately, including. But listen, what you're describing, I like the gamble. You know me. If you want to gamble
What
on
if someone takes Darnold, then they could get Baker Mayfield or Josh Allen. No.
Oh, okay. Rosen, you're just throwing him.
He's too smart.
reportedly discussed trading with the Browns for the #1 overall pick. According to reports, the deal is very dependent on where Kirk Cousins ends up. Nick, what do you think? Is this a good idea for the Broncos?
For the Broncos, yes. I mean, if you can move up to get your guy at #1, assuming that John Elway's not going to screw up who they pick, yeah. I don't think the Browns can trade this pick unless they have signed Kirk Cousins, and he's not even seemingly on. They are not on his short list. You cannot trade away the pick that becomes Carson Wentz, the pick that becomes Deshaun Watson, then have the #1 pick and trade back to the middle of the top 10 to 5 or 6. You can't do that. So, no, I don't think the Browns can do it. I think the Broncos, if they can, sure, why not?
It would be hard for the Browns to make a trade, but given the state where they are, you have to listen to all offers, especially John Elway. If he calls me, to me, he hadn't got this quarterback thing right. So he might give me, I might get a heist of picks, or a player or two. They have a good roster. What if I can get one of their cornerbacks with a draft pick? That first pick might be available. So be creative, Cleveland, because it's about getting players. Don't worry about them other 2 mistakes that you've already made the last couple years.
All right, moving on. Baker Mayfield is short in height, but not short in confidence about his pro potential. You see what I did there, Nick?
I did. It was great play on words.
Thank you, especially when I brought attention to it. Mayfield said if anyone is going to turn around the Cleveland Brown, it's going to be him. CC, tallest task in the NFL these seasons have been turning around the Cleveland Browns. Can Mayfield do it?
Well, this is what you're supposed to say. You're not supposed to be like Josh Rosen, talking about I don't want to play in Cleveland. Like, you have to think that you are a difference maker. When you come into these organizations, I believe Baker Mayfield, he is. He played that way. He's got the resume, the last 3 years, a finalist, top 5 for the Heisman Trophy. We saw him at Oklahoma. This is who Baker Mayfield is. I believe that he can change the Browns, but he needs some help because they need a bunch of players.
In fairness to Josh Rosen, he says he never said that about the Browns, and he came out recently and said, I'd be great playing with the Browns. In fairness to my guy, Josh Rosen, we don't know that he was taking shots at Cleveland. But Baker has said all the right things. Baker has done basically since the college football season ended, Baker's done everything you want a guy to do to be drafted high. And if there are going to be some people that question the Big 12, and a lot of people that question his height. I know you don't have as many concerns about his height as other people because of how well he played in college and the style in which he plays. But Baker's saying all the right things,
Yes.
and whether or not he can be basically this year's version of a Russell Wilson, we'll see. I mean, I'm a buyer in Baker Mayfield because of how much you like him, to be totally honest.
And finally, the feel-good story of the Combine has to be Central Florida linebacker Shaq Griffin. Ran the fastest 40 for a linebacker since 2003. Put up 20 reps on the bench press with a prosthetic hand because he only has one hand. Lost the other to a congenital birth defect when he was 4 years old. CC, how impressed were you with Griffin's performance?
Oh, very impressed. I mean, this has been a great story. If you watched the UCF story last year in college football with them going undefeated, Coach Frost leaving after the bowl game, going to Nebraska, where he's from. But him and his brother, the last couple years, his brother plays cornerback for Seattle. It's an amazing story when you look at some of the greatest athletes in the world. And for this kid, who's his whole life, it wasn't like it just happened. Like, his whole life, people have doubted him. And we always say, well, speed kills. The speed to get you paid in the NFL. Well, if that is the case, having a good resume, it shouldn't hurt him as far as the NFL draft. It's amazing. Now you can see why he was such a good football player. It makes sense. Like, his tape and what he did at UCF as a linebacker, it makes sense when you see the vertical leap. When you see him playing even in space, catching a football with one hand. Like, it's an amazing story, and it just adds to the storylines of the NFL going forward as far as opportunities and what football can do for your life. So I'm sure that he probably tried to play a lot of other sports, and football being one of the most complicated to be able to play without a hand. So I'm a big fan of him and his family.
This is amazing. Keep in mind, there was not a single player at the Combine who had accomplished more than him in college who could lose more in a 72-hour period because people were looking for reasons to doubt him. If he can't do the bench press, if he runs a slow 40, people were looking for reasons to say, we're not going to draft the one-handed kid. This is a guy who won Conference Player of the Year, who was the best player on the only undefeated team in all of college football. He's their best guy, the MVP of their Peach Bowl win. And then he goes to the Combine and knocks it out. And if people don't know the full background of his story, I just want to let people know this. He was born with a hand, but a deformed hand and deformed fingers. When he was 4 years old, his mother walked into the kitchen. He's 4. I have a 4-year-old. Saw him trying to cut his fingers off with a butcher knife. That's when they decided to end up doing the amputation.
Because he had no feeling in his
much.
fingers. And so, when he touched things, it was so painful for him.
Right.
That he decided
and
to do that.
And to do that, to see his identical twin brother go to UCF along with him, then get drafted. The year after his twin brother leaves, he leads them to an undefeated season. To do what he did in the 40 and then also on the bench press, with one hand, like to have built up that much strength in his core and his chest and his shoulders, even though we all know how hard it must be for him to lift weights in his left hand, like the different things he has to do, it's unbelievable. But forget the story part of it. This guy's a great football player. This guy will make, I would imagine, would make a team better as a mid-round draft pick. I love this story.
Absolutely. You can't duplicate the type of speed. We saw him playing in college football. He plays in space. He rushes the quarterback. Also, as a guy, when you go to play in football games, there's certain characteristics that you want in the football players. And it's just not all based on just raw talent. It's based on what people have overcome. And I'd love to go into a football game with a guy who's been told he can't do something his whole life. So his ability to be able to get over obstacles and how that transitions over to his teammates, to me, those are the kind of guys that need to be playing in the league.
Really great story.
So I'm looking forward to it.
All right, as we are moving on to the Cowboys' off-season story that just keeps giving. Des Bryant, coming off a subpar 2017, he's owed $12.5 million in 2018. There have been many speculating that Dallas will move on from Des. According to Jerry Jones, many are wrong. The Cowboys have different plans.
As I sit here, do we want him on the team next year? The answer is yes. We've addressed guys in the prime of their careers contracts before. We've made adjustment in the contracts. You continue for looking for ways to improve your value on your roster. But Des has a history with me and the Cowboys of working with his money. And he's not the only one that's happened.
All right, Cece, we've gone back and forth on Des Bryant, whether he has it in him to change, whether he would take a pay cut. I mean, there are a lot of questions surrounding this, but now he got sort of the blessing of all blessings from Jerry Jones. Is it a good move for the Cowboys, do you think, to bring Des back next season, based on the year he had?
Well, the Cowboys, they don't get better if they just release Des. They don't get better. To replace his talent and the cap hit that they're going to have to take because it's hard to replace that kind of talent. Now, Jerry said him and Des have history together. We're going to see how that history works out because the history is, regardless of, this will be the first time he's ever come to Des and said, I want you to take less money to do a job. Des said he didn't want to take less money, so they're going to have to work it out. I believe Des will be a Dallas Cowboy. It's in his best interest because Jerry has a lot of capital invested in Des Bryant. Not only in the salary that he's paid him, in the staffing, the people he's put around Des Bryant. Des has almost 24/7 people around the clock who watch him, people who call him, people getting him to the facility. Like, let's not forget the issues he had with Des Bryant as a young player. So now as an unproductive veteran, I mean, how valuable is he to the Cowboys? Now, he's more valuable to the Cowboys than he is to other teams. So I believe Des will understand and take the pay cut to continue playing with the Dallas. Because if he doesn't take the pay cut, I believe Jerry will walk away from it.
Wait, what do you mean he's more valuable to the Cowboys than to other teams?
Because the Cowboys know exactly what he can do. I believe he's a bigger asset in the locker room, to their quarterback, to Zeke. They know him. When you go someplace, you don't have history with those guys. Like, I believe he's a better asset for the Cowboys and is a better player than he would going somewhere else and learning a whole new system and a whole new environment.
And they've just invested time, money, and resources into him, as you allude to as well. Like, teams human beings, teams, general managers, whomever, in day-to-day life or in sports, have a hard time identifying what is a sunk cost and what is not. If you've put a lot of time and money into something, you don't want to walk away from it. You want to see it work. You mentioned that you think they will be able to get him to take a pay cut. That, I would be surprised by that. I wouldn't be surprised if they move the money around to where he's getting the same amount of money, they just change the salary cap part of it. But I bet Dez's agent is doing the same thing I'm doing, which is looking at the available free agent wide receivers and saying, okay, if you cut me.
That's a huge gamble. That's a huge gamble when you start looking at the list, because it's what value you bring to the team. Because these guys, do they have 3 poor years in a row with the Dallas Cowboys? So that list is relevant, but it's irrelevant to Jerry Jones as far as getting his team in a when you slice up the pie, they can't give Dez that slice of the pie and continue to do business. They have other guys on their defense who need to be signed. Like, these are things that are trickle-down effect. Dez Bryant is not worth $12 million. I don't care what his agent says, and I don't care what the list, who's on the list.
The point that I was trying to make is that, and maybe you don't care, that if Dez were cut today, if the news we were talking about is Dez Bryant's been cut by the Cowboys, what I think everyone would agree is the best free agent wide receiver available is Dez Bryant. And the Cowboys, I think we also agree on this, even with Dez Bryant, need more help on the wide receiver position, need more explosive players on the outside. So if it's already a need, I just feel like the leverage might actually sit in Dez's camp rather than the Cowboys' camp, because they know what the Cowboys need. They know that while he's slated to make $12.5, if they cut him, they don't get $12.5 million of cap relief. They get $4 million of cap relief. Like, I think they can do all those things and say, why would I take the pay cut?
There is no logical person that's sitting around right now saying, you know who has the leverage in the Dallas Dez Bryant thing? Dez Bryant. No, you know the reason why? Because we got 3 years of film of him being an average receiver. All right? So that's not. But
who would they? But the thing, my question is, how?
It doesn't matter. Sometimes when your employer, when they want to get more salary cap room, they start looking at, wait, how do we get more money? Well, we're paying this guy $12 million. It's no free agent list that's going to have an effect on that. Like, this is looking at what they're doing, who they're paying, who are their most productive players, because those are the ones that warrant the biggest contracts. That's what he said. I've done this before. I've gone to players before. He is setting the stage telling us, I'm getting ready to go to Dez Bryant, just like other Cowboys players, and I'm going to ask them to work around the salary that we're paying him.
How do you get Dez Bryant to be better than he's been the last couple of years, especially if the first part of your conversation opens with, we're going to ask you to take less money?
You got to put him in the slot. You got to teach him a package where he is in the slot, and teams cannot just isolate him as the split end receiver to the boundary side. It's easier for teams to negate what he's going to do. It's far more predictable when he's outside than if you moved him inside. There is no 40 games of tape on Dez Bryant playing in the slot because he's only played a little bit of it. So that's what I would do. I go back to the basics as far as his fundamentals, the things that got him this way, and I would add 1 or 2 routes to him. Another thing is, from a philosophy standpoint, you have to throw the ball down the field to Dez Bryant. You have to give him a couple 50-50 jump ball opportunities during the game. He is not a blazer down the sideline, so you have to give him an opportunity, because that's what makes Dez a little bit different than the other receivers. His ability to be able to come up with those plays on the 50-50 ball.
To go up and win a jump ball. Like, that's what some of if you think of Dez Bryant highlights, very rarely is it him running free down the field. It's him running up, high pointing a ball, getting it. Now, most of those highlights, to CeCe's point, happened 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. But that is his skill set still there. And if he can turn into a good slot receiver.
I don't think it's good leverage when you tell Jerry, hey, Jerry, go back and watch me in 2014.
Right.
But it might be good leverage to say, go watch Eric Decker, because that's your #1 receiver if you're tough.
Welcome back to First Things First. We welcome in former NFL head coach Eric Mangini.
Good to see you, Coach.
Gang's all back
Gang's
together.
all back in town, Coach. Feel good, warm, comfortable? Want to wrap us up and just talk football?
I've missed all of you.
You got a nice little haircut there, Coach. You look like your son.
Well, you know, I'm trying to go youthful.
All right,
How's it
Benjamin
working?
Button.
Good.
Very good stuff. All right, so the Kirk Cousins sweepstakes continues. According to reports, Cousins prefers the Vikings as his free agent destination. He is said to believe Minnesota gives him the best chance to win immediately. That and those Minnesota Sunsets. The other top teams are the Broncos, the Cardinals, and the Jets. Coach, would Cousins make the Vikings the best team in the NFC next season?
To me, this is the best example of how imprecise a science quarterbacks are.
Yeah.
So Minnesota's got a draft pick. They've got a guy they traded for. They've got a free agent that was on the low end, and now potentially they're going to go get a free agent that's on the high end from a team that doesn't want the guy and letting him move on, and they signed a different free agent. So everybody's moving around. Does it guarantee that Minnesota's the best team? No, I think their defense is what puts them in that elite category. They're special that way, and I'm not sure he's going to move the dial. I'm not sure it's going to be that much significantly better than what they had.
Would you say, though, that the one position they're missing, like they're a quarterback away from being an elite team and one of the best going into next season?
Yeah, to me, they have all the pieces in place, and I do think if they go get someone that hopefully Kirk can be, that should put him over the top short term. Now, what they have to pay for him, I think long term is going to dramatically change the way the Vikings are composed, and so they're going to have to win now if they make this decision.
I think it's impossible for Coach to look at Kirk Cousins going to the Vikings absent of what the salary is and how it's going to change the team. How that team has been put together, how they've made some smart picks. Even when they had to take risk with Sam Bradford, they did that. High risk. Sam still gets hurt, though. So how do they solidify their quarterback position absent of turning the team over at the mercy of the salary cap? So I understand what you're saying. You're kind of, yes, I like Kirk Cousins. But Case Keenum, how much money can I get him for less to get the same productivity that I believe will be close to Kirk Cousins? So I think that Coach is like, man, this team is well put together. They are very close. They have Dalvin Cook coming back off a knee injury, adding him to that offense. They still need some offensive line help. Do I want to sacrifice by paying a guy over $20 million, seeing where the team is right now? Because if you take it back a half a game and they get home field advantage, I believe they're in the Super Bowl. They don't go to Philadelphia. That changes all the way around. So do I want to pay that huge price for Kirk Cousins now that eventually I'm going to have to sacrifice in the future? And it's going to change the structure of how the Vikings do business there with Rick Spielman as a general manager.
And I think the question's great. Like the best team in the NFC in 2018. Because if they sign Kirk Cousins, this team is drastically different in 2019. You have 5 front-end free agents from your front 7 that are free agents in 2019. With Stephon Diggs is a free agent in 2019. So I think they have the ability, the way you can kind of manipulate the salary cap and because of who they have under contract and for what, to basically run it back with mostly the same team. They don't have a bunch of key free agents this offseason. Run it back with basically the same team plus Kirk Cousins for this upcoming year. But if you don't win the Super Bowl, and we know you can be the best team in football and not win the Super Bowl, a million things can happen. Then all of a sudden in 2019, you are very different than what the Vikings have been over the last half decade, which is basically since Zimmer got there, they've had 3 different quarterbacks over 3 years, none that other teams loved. Teddy Bridgewater fell to the end of the first round. Sam Bradford had bounced around the league. Case Keenum was available for anyone. They were good every single year. Why? Because they had that defense, because they had those weapons on offense. You're going to lose that identity of the team if you're paying Cousins $30 million per.
And you're paying him money that you'd pay Drew Brees or Tom Brady or that elite group. And you need to be sure that you're going to get that type of production because of the sacrifices that you do have to make everywhere else across the roster. And short term, I think it's a really good answer. Long term, I'm not convinced this is the best decision for Minnesota.
So what is the best decision? If they end up not going with Kirk Cousins, they have their pick right now because none of those 3 guys are signed that they had last year on the roster. What do you do? I
believe Case is the #1 option for them. I believe Teddy Bridgewater is very, very intriguing because they know him. They love his leadership. They love his overall character. And they believe that now, with the skilled people they have around him, they were a lot better than when he was the starting quarterback. So if they were able to get Teddy back to where he was playing, that combination and the salary, like you can't look at who you can get absent of how much it would cost.
Yes.
Like they were paying Sam Bradford a lot of money. So I don't think they're going to bring Sam back when they can bring Case and Teddy potentially back and have them compete for that starting job, Coach.
And really, they don't have a choice of those 3 guys. Those 3 guys now have a choice of where they want to go. And if during this whole process they feel like They weren't loved. They weren't respected. They weren't wanted. Maybe their thought process is going to be, let me go somewhere else and show that I can do the things that I did here, there, and do them as well or do it better. And it's going to be interesting. Ideally, you get 2 out of those 3 guys back at a lower rate than you'd have to go pay someone like Kirk Cousins, and you're able to keep building the team the way you've done it.
But, Cece, the salary cap concerns notwithstanding, if you were Rick Spielman, you would go heavy after Kirk Cousins, correct? Like, if you were, you said you think Case is the best option. I want to make sure the audience knows you meant the best option of those 3 guys who were with the team last year.
The only way that I go with Kirk Cousins if he takes a reduction in the salary. If he's like, listen, the Vikings are a commodity. I like the franchise. I want to play inside. I know your defense is young enough to keep them around me. Kirk Cousins, to me, should go to the Vikings or the Broncos. The Vikings, to me, are a better team, a better situation, younger receivers, younger skilled guys. That's what I would do. If I was Kirk Cousins, he's made a lot of money in the last couple of years. I would give them a long-term deal, but I would take it at a reduced rate because I don't want to play for the Jets. I don't care how much money they're going to pay me. Man, I'm not trying to get knocked around and no chance of winning with the Jets. So for me, I'm trying to win. I know getting paid is of a high priority. He is going to get paid, but I would take a reduction. That's what I would do.
He's going to go for the most money, and he's going to go for the most guaranteed money. And in looking at that, to me, if you are that guy, and I've said this before about going to the Browns, if you feel that you're that guy, that you should be paid that amount of money, that you're a franchise quarterback, then let's see it.
Well, if we can just go, I mean, however far back you want to go in the NFL, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, we have seen time and again, there's 2 paths to being a championship contender, call it a conference finalist or better. One is you have that guy at quarterback. You have Brady, you have Rodgers, you have Breeze, you have Roethlisberger. The other is you have competent quarterback play that is inexpensive. Be that Russell Wilson on his rookie contract, be that Joe Flacco before he got paid. The teams that we have not seen is what I fear Cousins is going to be for who he goes to. The guy who is paid like Breeze, Brady, Rodgers, who is more in the middle tier.
Stafford.
That's where I think Stafford is. That's why I didn't like that deal for them. It's where Flacco has become, where you are a good quarterback, what is called a franchise quarterback, but you're paid so high they can't bring the players back.
Real quick, just imagine if Matthew Stafford was on the Vikings, though.
Oh, absolutely.
So that lets you know he's not in the middle of the pack.
Well, but I wonder if the Vikings would look like they did if they were paying their quarterback $30 million. I like what you said about Cousins. If you can get Cousins to take $22 million a year, and it's like, would I rather have Cousins for 22 or Bridgewater and Keenum combined for 16? I'll pay the extra 6. But if it's Bridgewater and Keenum combined for 16 or Cousins for 32, then it's a significant question to me.
To me, Flacco's a great example. There's a guy that got paid a lot of money, and what did the Ravens have to do? They had to dismantle a lot of other parts, and he wasn't able to necessarily raise the remaining parts up to the level that some other guys are able to do. So they've been in the situation they've been in since they paid him. To me, those elite quarterbacks, too, they're going to get paid a significant amount of money no matter where they go. And Tom Brady willing to take some less in order for the team to be really good, to me, that works.
Mangini on First Things First. One of the most intriguing prospects in the NFL draft, 2016 Heisman quarterback Lamar Jackson. Some are saying he's a better version of Michael Vick. Others say he's not a better version of Michael Vick. Einhorn-Finkel, Finkel-Einhorn. Jackson addressed rumors of switching positions. Take a listen.
Not at all. I'm not going to be a wide receiver at all tomorrow. Quarterback positions. No, sir. I'm a quarterback.
Well, he seems pretty set on playing the position that he plays and the position he wants to play. Is Jackson making the right move, Coach, staying at quarterback, whether or not prospects and pundits are giving him a shot at playing that position in the NFL?
Yeah, I think it's the right move for him. And if he can find a place that'll give him an opportunity to try to be a quarterback, I think that's great. From a club perspective, if you're going to draft him, you've got to look at how high do you have to draft him. If you're not sure where he's going to play, I took Brad Smith, who had 50 NCAA records in college, was prolific in a lot of areas in the 4th round, and he ended up, we gave him a shot at quarterback, but he ended up playing wide receiver, kick returner, special teams. And I remember when I was on the phone with him at the draft, he said, look, if you're not going to play me at quarterback, don't draft me. And I said, Brad, this isn't recruiting. We're going to draft you.
Deal with it.
You're going to come
it.
here. We'll experiment with this and see where it goes. But you also need to be open to contributing to this team in other ways if that doesn't work out.
Just stay with Brad Smith for a moment. Tell me if this is fair. Brad Smith, while I watched him at the University of Missouri. I was living in Kansas City around the time that he was playing there. He was not as accomplished of a college player as Lamar Jackson at that position. And, tell me if this is also fair, there was more reason to believe that he could adapt to kick returning, to receiving than Lamar Jackson just because of their physical stature. Do both those things seem fair to you?
Well, maybe he wasn't as accomplished, but his resume was pretty impressive as a college quarterback, and the amount of records he had was significant. And looking at it, you wanted to give him an opportunity because I respected his dream and I respected the things that he hoped for. But there also is a reality in the NFL where if that doesn't work out, you need to be able to contribute in a different way. And with Brad, he ended up playing for the Jets through his rookie contract and signed a good deal with the Bills and then played a little bit for Philadelphia. It worked out in a different way, but probably the best way overall.
Well, my biggest issue is the player. And whatever the player wants to do, the player should have the option. Because right now, he doesn't belong. He's not property of the NFL. He's trying to come in, transition, and he's transitioning from quarterback, which he's only played. The only thing that, the reason I think it's a little puzzling is just because he is good in open space, everyone thinks everyone can play wide receiver. Like, wide receiver is a tough position to play. Yes, we do have some examples of Randall L. converting over from a quarterback at Indiana to a good wide receiver in the NFL. Yes, we do have Edelman. These are rare cases, but neither one of these guys could play quarterback in the NFL. Their only option was a returner or slot wide receiver. Like, those were their only options. Lamar Jackson has a legitimate chance to develop into an NFL quarterback. He deserves that right. And when a player says, I want to play a certain position, you need to be on guard. I respect Coach Mangini. When you're trying to manage a roster, yes, how many things can a guy do? The more things you can do in the NFL, the longer you can stay. But if a guy is not bought into the other things that it would take to be an expert at this position, it becomes very, very hard to train him. Lamar Jackson, you need to listen to him. He can't catch. So when you can't catch, you can't play wide receiver. I don't care how good you are in space. Like, you're not going to be able to catch the ball. And there's nothing more demeaning on an offense or takes the spirit out of an offense besides hitting the quarterback is guys dropping the ball. So you can't say a guy can play another position just because he's electric in space. Sometimes it doesn't transfer over.
And unlike Brad Smith or Antoine Randall or Julian Edelman, those guys, if they were just quarterbacks, go either at the end of the draft or undrafted. Lamar Jackson is projected to be, as a quarterback, end of the first, beginning of the second-round pick. If today Lamar Jackson said, you know what, guys, you've worn me down. I'm going to play wide receiver in the NFL. He's no first-round, second-round pick as a wide receiver. A guy who's never played, who says he can't catch, who people have questions about his durability as a quarterback, all of a sudden, he would be a project at wide receiver. It would be crazy for him to embrace that.
Now, after the draft, I tell Lamar, we change our objectives. There's a team that's invested in me. They're invested in my talent. Obviously, they're invested in my quarterback skills long term. But on day one, I look at that coach and say, man, coach, how can I help this team? And he says, you know something, I need you to run a couple reverses. I need you to return some kicks. In the process to develop me as a quarterback in a partnership, I will do those things. But I wouldn't do those things before the draft unless a team came to me at my pro day and said, you know something, we have a great deal of interest in you as both. Would you be willing to work out at that position?
And Cris makes a really good point. You can't minimize the skill set it takes to play wide receiver. A lot of times people you're just trying to find a spot for a guy. Brad Smith didn't quite develop into the wide receiver we were hoping to because he didn't have that background, and it's a lot harder to do than people understand, and we were quick to slot guys into other spots. But when you look at Russell Wilson coming out of college, I remember doing him and saying, I don't know if he can play quarterback, but he's a guy I'd want on my team. He was exciting in so many different ways. And where they took him in the fourth round, you can do that.
Beginning of end of the third round.
Oh, is that end of the third?
Yep.
Okay, but in that space, you can make that decision. And if you have to go and take Lamar at a much higher spot, then you need to commit to him as a quarterback, and you need to try to make that work. And at some point, if it's not working, then have the conversation, hey, let's try something else.
Didn't we see this a little bit with Tim Tebow? Wanted to play the position he wanted to play. Coaches were enamored by him, loved who he was, who he could have been. And he decided to play the position he wanted to play, and he bounced around a little bit, and then he was out.
The distinct difference is Tim Tebow could not throw a football. People use the Tim Tebow example as, hey, the guy won the Heisman.
But they still brought him in as a quarterback.
I'm going to say this. Tim Tebow cannot play tight end either. Tim Tebow played the only position he could play for those 3 years. The NFL lifespan over the last 30 years has been 3.4 years. If you look at Tim Tebow, watch when he started running into problems. Year number 4. The league had caught up to him. Quarterback was the only position he could play for 3 years. He wasn't developing as a passer.
And even that amazing serendipitous run he had with Denver, I was at one of those games against the Chiefs. He completed 2 passes all game and won the game. There was another game in that amazing run where it took a fumble by the opposing team's running back when they could have just taken knees for them. Right. People use Tebow as an example. It's not about race, or it happens to all these Heisman Trophy winners. Tebow is a 1 in a million for a lot of reasons, not the least of which.
But Tebow got 3 chances to play quarterback.
For multiple organizations as a first-round pick.
They're trying to get Lamar to change before the draft, before he gets any opportunity.
Despite the fact that anyone watching it, I am not a mechanics expert the way you are. I'm certainly not a mechanics expert the way you are. But anyone watching, Tim Tebow knew, okay, he throws different than any quarterback that has been successful ever in the NFL. Lamar does not. We've seen guys play like Lamar, look like Lamar, be highly successful in the NFL. And so I don't know that he'll be successful. I don't know any of these guys that will be successful. But I think he's got a better chance at quarterback than any other position.
And look, all quarterbacks don't have to be cut the same way, and all systems aren't the same way. And you saw it even with Deshaun Watson. I remember watching him coming out of college. Again, there were questions on how good of a thrower he would be, whether or not he could develop. But the one thing I put down is he is going to be a problem for defenses with the ball in his hands because he had such unique talent in that area. So if you're looking at it from a team perspective, you know you have that. You know you have that thing taken care of. Now, how much can you develop? And a lot of that, too, is about the person, about the human being, about their willingness to do the things they need to do to continue to grow and learn.
Back to the NFL Combine, Wyoming quarterback Josh Allen had scouts oohing and eyeing over his strong arm. One coach said Allen can throw up to 70 miles an hour and up to a 90 yards. CC, is Josh Allen sort of leapt ahead of the other quarterbacks in the draft?
Well, when you look at just pure talent, like what guy looks like the prototype NFL quarterback? He has the size from a height, weight standpoint. He's a very good athlete. Can he throw the football anywhere on the NFL field? Will he have one of the biggest arms in the NFL instantly? Yes, but is he the best thrower of the football? Compared to who can throw the football the furthest, those things are very, very different. I believe that Sam Darnold is a better thrower of the football, but yes, if you want to do trick shots, if you want to play horse, this guy right here, he has the best throwing talent. He has the best arm talent of anyone in this year's draft.
Which doesn't mean accuracy.
No.
Watching the Combine this week, and it was funny when you watch the quarterbacks. Because they say their name, they say their college, and beneath them, they try to tell you, like, their best accolade. So it was Lamar Jackson, 2016 Heisman Trophy winner. It was Baker Mayfield. It either said 3-time Heisman finalist or 2017 Heisman Trophy winner. Sam Darnold, Pac-12 champion. For Josh Allen, it said honorable mention all Mountain West. So he played in a nothing conference, was not the best quarterback in that conference, not the second best quarterback in that conference last year, but the third best. And by the way, I looked at it. He threw for 1,800 yards total. He only missed 2 games, played in 11 games last year, threw for 1,800 yards. The Josh Allen discussion frustrates me. Because it feels to me, CC, like people decided going into this college football season, Josh Allen's a top prospect. And I got it. Threw for 3,200 yards his second year in Wyoming. Like, okay, we're going to see this progression, keep moving up. And then despite the fact that he was bad, had bad accuracy, had terrible yards per attempt, had terrible total passing yards. The team wasn't very good. Despite all those things, people were like, nope, guy can still throw from the midfield to the crossbar on his knees. Got to be a top prospect. I don't see it with him. I don't understand it with him.
Well, it's easy for me to understand. Any guy that has a big arm is going to have an opportunity to play in the NFL. When you have the type of body, when you have the height, when you have the weight, when you have that arm strength, you are going to get a chance. It's just like a 7-footer in the NBA. They are going to give them chance. Is it fair? Yeah, it's fair because it is a talent-based business. He has great arm talent. He has things that you can't teach. That's the reason why he's at the top of the draft board.
And he doesn't just have a big arm. If you ask John Elway, he'd say, oh, this guy's my prototypical quarterback. The guy that you think, the tall guy, the big arm, you know, the sort of, the big hands. Like, you look at a guy like that and you almost want him to be your successful quarterback in the NFL. Hasn't been that way in the last couple of years, which is why there have been so many misses. I say John Elway because the Broncos have 90% of those.
This is the thing. We have a prototype for every position in the NFL except kicker. There is a certain size, there is a certain weight, there is a certain skill level that we expect. With Josh, you can't teach some of the things that he can do. You can't teach those things. So when we talk about the quarterback's the most important. When you have a guy who's a prospect like this, you want to get him on your franchise because we don't know when we're going to see the next Josh Allen, someone who has that. Now, he didn't have the type of final year that you would like to be able to respond to the 3,200 yards that he had the previous season. That was because of injury. That was part of the team that he played on. That's why he was honorable mention. But when you talk about who is a guy at the next level, who has the most talent? He's one of the guys that has the most amount of talent.
CC, a few months ago we were talking about the Patriots, and I said they could, if they, you know, there's a way they could lose if they, even if Tom Brady plays really well. And you said to me, you're like, well, I haven't seen that. Like, I'd like to see that happen. I have not seen a quarterback be bad in college and then become great in the pros. I haven't seen it. I've seen quarterbacks not get to play in college and turn into good quarterbacks in the pros. Matt Castle was that guy. Not that he was good, but he had a good season at least. There are a lot of different stories I've seen of guys turning into successful pro quarterbacks.
Josh wasn't bad in college. He had a half of a bad year, all right? His last year,
the whole thing, I thought, he threw for over 230 yards once. Like, I didn't think he was good all year long.
Look at the attempts. Look at the people around him. Look at the personnel around him. Like, it was not very, very good. When you have the type of arm talent he has, you're going to get drafted high. Forget what his senior year was. We knew before this year's draft. I told you several months ago, this guy potentially was going to, and you looked at me like I was crazy.
No, but that is, what you said there is 100% correct, and that's what's frustrating to me. We knew before this year, so it didn't matter that this year, and you can say look at the talent around him, but the counterpoint to that is look at the talent he's going against. Like, to me, those two cancel each other out to a degree.
When you're playing quarterback, and if they can get to your quarterback, and if you don't have a running game, you don't have good wide receivers, how are you going to dominate the game?
Go ahead.
We haven't heard. Well, the last couple of weeks, Josh Allen hasn't been the guy at the top of this class. He seemed to be like maybe 3 or 4, or 5, whatever it is, but within that mix. Then all of a sudden you have the Combine, and now there's talk of him at number 1. How much of an influence does the Combine actually have where a team can actually say, you know, we're going to stake our future in this guy as opposed to this guy because of a couple of tangibles
I don't believe the Combine changed anything. Just because we're talking about stuff does not mean that the priority for the quarterbacks, the order for the quarterbacks have changed. And the reason why I know the Combine didn't change anything, because all the quarterbacks didn't work out. So if all the quarterbacks had worked out and we'd be re-rating the quarterbacks, then we would have a legitimate case. But with Sam Darnold not throwing at the Combine, you're not going to change the order because a guy decides he's a healthy scratch at the Combine is waiting for his pro day.
Josh Allen reminds me of Christian Hackenberg. A guy who, after his first year playing, people were like, this guy could be the number 1 pick of the draft. The production wasn't there, but his size was there. His strength was there. His hand size was there. Jets ended up taking him, I think.
I believe Josh has more arm talent than Hackenberg, and I believe he's got more heart than Hackenberg.
I think if you were as social as I was Saturday night, you stayed in to watch Rockets Celtics. Lucky you. And also sort of not lucky you for not having plans Saturday night. Yes, there will be other Saturday nights. There won't be too many games as good as this one. Both teams wanted it. Rockets walked away with it, picking up their 15th win in a row and securing a league-best 49-13 record. As good as that is, they still only remain a half game up on the Warriors, who themselves keep winning. Nick, can the Rockets continue this success through the postseason? We know what their postseason history has been.
I'm so glad you said that, Jenna, because the Rockets in postseason history, because it's about Chris Paul, Mike D'Antoni, and, of course, James Harden. And I feel like there is just a level of almost misinformation going on about what these guys' actual histories are. So let's start with the head coach, because people are like, D'Antoni teams in the regular season, they're great. But then in the postseason, in 2005, when the Suns maybe could have won the title, coached by Mike D'Antoni, they make the Western Conference Finals, but their second or third best player, Joe Johnson, broke his face, so they lost to a 59-win Spurs team. There's no shame there. In 2006, they make the Western Conference Finals, and they lose to a 60-win Mavs team. In 2007, they're playing a 58-win Spurs team, a team that if they beat, they would have won the title because on the other side of the bracket was a way too young Cleveland Cavalier team. And what happened? Their guys got suspended after Robert Horry hip-checked Steve Nash, knocked him, and the guys ran on the court. And then in 2008, the last year of the D'Antoni era, they lose in the first round to a Spurs team with a better record. Like, I don't see the choking there that I'm supposed to believe has happened. James Harden and the Rockets have played to their seed every year but one since he's been there. Like, the idea that these guys have some history of wilting in the playoffs from coach to best player to second best player, I just don't think the history backs that up. So, yeah, I believe in the Rockets. Yeah, I don't think the postseason's going to be some boogie monster for them.
So
I don't believe
what should the narrative be? Like, if it's not that, like, because D'Antonio hadn't been successful, Harden hadn't been successful, Chris Paul has been hurt, not been successful. Like, as one of the great players in his era, what player would we say that has the credentials of Chris Paul and has had less success than Chris Paul? Because that's what we talk about. So it's not unfair that D'Antonio, that he's getting criticized, or that people are moving now from, oh, they have the best record, to now how will they do in the playoffs? Because that's the conversation. They're going to be in contention for the best record, number one or number two. Chris Paul, like, this is true. People didn't make this up about him. So what should the narrative be as we get into March?
I mean, I think the narrative on Chris Paul should be, when has he had the better team? When has Chris Paul's team lost? And it's like, man, the Clippers sure were better than the team.
I mean, look how we talk about LeBron. How many times was his team not better?
Yeah, and by the way, it was unfair. It was unfair to do that to LeBron. What we've done to Chris Paul, we move the goalposts on these guys. Like, Chris Paul hit a walk-off game winner, Game 7 against the Spurs. And nobody cares because the next series they end up losing in 7 to the Rockets. Like, in a series, by the way, he missed 2 games. In a series in the closeout Game 6 where he had 31-7-11. Like, I think Chris Paul's been great despite not making Western Conference Finals. James Harden, in his career with the Rockets in the postseason, gives you 27-6-7. Like, I just don't think these guys have been bad in the playoffs the way the narrative is.
Right. I just think that when you look at look at Toronto, what would be the story with Toronto? Cleveland, what would be their story? You have to look at legitimate ways for them not to reach their potential. Because if they don't reach the finals, it's not going to be a good year. So now between here and there, what else are we going to talk about? I mean, if they continue to play, that's all we can. So the conversation is legitimate. Why? Because we've never seen it. They've never collectively done it together. So until they do it, and then even if they did it, you know what we'll be saying? Hey, man, could they repeat their performance? Because that is part of what we do in sports. Until we have seen it, until they have proven it to us, because we know the West is going to be a battle, it is a legitimate conversation. That's why I believe it's more important for them to be the number 1 seed. All right? So I'm not concerned about them in the playoffs yet until I see them. I like to see them this 20-game stretch.
Yeah.
how does Joe Johnson blend in? Because I'm concerned about Joe Johnson because the way they move the ball and the way they've closed out games, does Joe Johnson really help them? I know him and D'Antoni, they have history and everything, but does he actually help them and make them better? That's a legitimate concern coming down the stretch.
You brought them up as the best team right now, and can they maintain this success? I look at the standings every day, and I keep thinking there's something wrong with my refresh button. It's always a half a game up on the Warriors, because as well as they're playing, Warriors are playing well, too. I think they've won 5 in a row or something. How much would you like to see that cushion extended to feel more confident in this team?
But that's got to do with things out of their control. That's got to do with the Warriors losing. And the Rockets have won 15 straight games. So and
they still only have a half game lead.
That's my point.
Yes.
Exactly.
And so they're playing as well as they can. The Warriors have been better post All-Star break, CC, as you thought they would be. Even though the Warriors, that game against the Hawks this weekend, they were at about, forget 70%, they were about 40% and still won the game.
Won it, yeah.
Listen, the Rockets, every one of these games matters, which is why the comeback against Boston was so impressive. They went from down 6 to up 2 in less than 90 seconds of game time in the final minutes of that game. Those are the types of wins. That was a playoff atmosphere. Boston wanted that game so badly, and the Rockets got it. But this idea that I don't think it's totally fair to use the comparison of Cleveland or Toronto or Golden State with Houston just because...
No, I wasn't using it as an excuse. I said there's a narrative around each one of those teams.
Right, but those teams, the players on those teams are what created that narrative. This Rockets team's totally new because they added Chris Paul.
So the question is, what will they do when they're due? What will they do in the playoffs? That part we don't know. That is an unknown, and it should be talked about. I'm not saying that they're going to collapse, but if we don't talk about Chris Paul not reaching the conference finals, if we don't talk about Harden, what happened to him the last couple years, if we don't talk about the coach, what are we doing?
No, I get it, but I just think I think that there have been extenuating circumstances, or we have recreated some of the history on each of those players. Like the idea that Harden hasn't had more success in the postseason, I just don't. I mean, he's been to 2 conference finals. Chris Paul, I understand he hasn't been to a conference finals. I don't think he's been on the better team. But you're right. If they don't make it this year, it's just going to be exacerbated. I understand that part of it. Now that the NBA season is heating up, I wanted to talk about another podcast we do at Fox Sports, and that's Cris Broussard's In the Zone. Each week, Cris breaks down what's trending in the NBA and the biggest names in the league. Previous guests include Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Shaq, John Wall, and myself. So if you love the NBA, make sure to subscribe to In the Zone wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, you guys remember when the Cavs made all those trades and then the team won a couple games and then everything was great? Well, Cleveland lost 126-117 to the Nuggets on Sunday, and they're now just 4-4 since all those new guys came to town. LeBron James says the entire team needs to improve.
We're all trying to get better. It's not just the guys that just we're at the deadline, but it's all of us. We're all trying to figure it out.
My new favorite question to Nick, because I've asked it every single day since we started the show, September 1st. Is it time to start worrying about the Cavs?
I'm not certain why we would. I know that the Cavs are...
The regular season games don't mean anything. When you go out there and you have a team on one side, one team on the other side, and you lose, no need to be worrying about it.
Are you concerned? Are you concerned? Go ahead, you go.
Yeah, I believe winning games are important.
Okay, so are you concerned about the Cavs?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been concerned for a long time.
Okay, so
the trade did not cure what I have. And that is doubt that the Cavs, can they put it all together? Are they a championship team? Yes, I have doubts about that. Yes.
It put a Band-Aid on it, but I don't think it cured it.
Again, I guess our question is, what are we discussing here? Are we discussing, are the Cavs the favorites to win the title? No, they haven't been the favorites to win the title all year, and there was nothing they could have done throughout the regular season.
What's a good season for Cleveland?
A successful season is winning the title.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So,
do you have concerns about them winning the title?
But that would have been Chris, that would have been the question no matter what. Of course, everyone would have been concerned.
What's the problem with that?
Everyone would have been concerned with the Cavs' chances of winning the title as long as Golden State exists in its current iteration, especially since the Kyrie trade happened. But if we're talking about because they lost to Denver, and because they're now 4-4 since the trades, what is my level of concern? I know this about the Cavs. They have gone through 3 separate separate team makeovers throughout the year. Somewhat unprecedented for a team in one season. They're going to, by the way, have to go through a fourth when Kevin Love gets back. The beginning of the year, they didn't have the training camp with LeBron. They had all these new players post-Kyrie. They struggled right then. Then they got going, and then Isaiah Thomas came back. They struggled there. Then the trade deadline happens. I don't know if it's fair to say they struggled. That game, if you watched, it's a one-point game with 2 minutes left. Missed 3, made 3, and game changed. But am I worried about the Cavs clearly being the best team in their conference come the playoffs? No, I'm not worried about that. I don't know where you stand on that. I feel like that's the question.
Well, I think the question should be, can they win a championship? Are you concerned about their ability to win a championship? Yes, I'm very concerned. This is the reason why. Because even since they've gotten the new players, LeBron James has played well. But the rest of the guys have not blended in well with him. So that's my number one concern. LeBron is playing well. My number two concern, how much juice does George Hill have left in the tank? And is he good enough offensively for them to be a championship team? That's number two. Number three, the younger players. They are younger, but they're the same bad defensive team. So that's number three. Number four, Tristan Thompson, even before he got hurt. How good is he as the Cavs center? And should Kevin Love be their center? Does that 4? Here comes number 5. J.R. Smith throws something on one of the assistant coaches.
I know.
Okay, so no, Nick shouldn't be concerned.
Right,
but anyone else out there who's watching basketball, if you think that Cleveland is a championship team and you are missing these things, then you're not watching what's going on.
CC, I'm watching what's going on. I've watched every Cavs game this year. The idea that we have to...
So J.R. throwing something on the assistant coach, that didn't concern you?
That concerned me for J.R.'s future with the team. Does it concern...
You're not concerned about J.R.'s psyche?
Well, I don't know. His first game back was one of his best games of the year. So I don't think that J.R. is not a guy I'm counting on right now. We've talked about this all year about J.R. Go ahead.
Is Damon Jones, is that LeBron James's man?
That is LeBron's guy, yes. The guy he threw the soup on, if people don't know. Yes.
That does not concern you, Nick?
They weren't arguing about LeBron. Like, I don't understand this. Cris.
Nick, we know how these teams work, all right? You're not going to have a guy, I don't care if he's J.R., throw something on one of your boys, and we know that's LeBron James's guy. If you think that doesn't have internal team locker room discontent, like, oh, everything's just smooth in Cleveland. Well, I'm glad you look at it that way. Everyone should have those type of glasses to be able to look at the Cavs at.
What I know is this, is that they are without their second best player. They have played 30 games this year with a actual roster.
That's a legitimate concern.
Right, if he weren't coming back, if it were an injury that you thought would affect him in the playoffs.
You'd be concerned about how he's going to adapt with the other new players.
Right.
And so those are legitimate concerns.
They are.
So you can admit that.
I said it, if you were listening, I said it 10 minutes ago, that the Cavs, that they will have to go through a fourth rebuild or getting new players involved when Kevin Love comes back, because these guys haven't played with him before. But am I concerned about their ability to make the NBA Finals? No. My feelings on the Cavs are the same right now they were at the beginning of the year. They will make the NBA Finals and be underdogs in those NBA Finals. How they play Game 8 with the new players is not going to change my opinion.
It doesn't matter to you whether they are seeded 7th or 1st or 3rd or 4th?
As long as LeBron James is playing, I will expect a championship from him. If he's the greatest player in the world, when one player can dominate a series, that should be the expectations for a LeBron James-based team. Now, that should be the question. Are they championship caliber? No, for which I do have concerns.
Okay, I will be writing that down and ask you that exact way with that same inflection tomorrow. So we're good on that. That's segment 4. Pepper, if you're listening in the control room. Moving on to Lonzo Ball. Ball had 18 points, 11 assists, 7 rebounds Saturday in a win over the Spurs, and that was on 6 of 10 from three-point shooting. Lakers 4-0 since he came back from that knee injury. But despite his recent success, Lonzo says, quote, people are still going to hate. We're not hating here. CC, is it looking like Lonzo can live up to the Lonzo Ball hype?
I don't know if the hype is, but what I see is a rookie playing in the NBA who had some time off on the court. He's healthier now than he's ever been. He started the season where he was injured starting the season, so he's probably healthier now. He's seen more NBA basketball. He's been around the NBA a couple times. He's adapting to the game. The pick and roll in the game against San Antonio, they're going underneath the pick and roll. He's shooting three. This is what NBA players do. So through practice, through the coaching staff, he's able to make these shots that he wasn't making earlier. So that comes about with practice. That comes with confidence. So, yes, he's a better version of himself. More games he plays, he should continue to get better. He wasn't playing bad basketball. There's just some parts to his game that needed to improve. There were some parts to his game that hadn't lived up to Magic Johnson saying that he would have his jersey retired. But as a rookie, we knew that he would get better, but there were some things as far as rebounding the basketball and some things he was doing as an NBA player that were outstanding. He's gotten better at shooting the basketball, which is going to be a drastic improvement in his overall game.
I mean, that's the key. The fact of the matter is the first 25 games he played, his defense was good. His rebounding was elite for his position. His passing was elite for a rookie. But his shot in offensive game, non-passing, was broken. And since then, the last 15 games he's played, his shot not only has it not been broken anymore, look at that. I mean, he's shooting 44% from three over the last 15 games from 24% from three in the first 25 games. Like, that's the difference. The difference is in that improved three-point shot has led to an increased overall percentage on his regular field goal percentage. Like, that is the difference. And if this guy is just, 44% is an elite three-point shooter. I don't think he is that long-term. But if he is just an adequate three-point shooter, the rest of his game is already so mature. He's a better defender than I thought he would be at any point. I thought he'd be a defensive liability. The coaches on the Lakers say he's been their best defender on the team. He's obviously their best passer. Like, if he can hit shots, he becomes a dynamic offensive player, and he becomes the guy that they thought was worthy of the number 2 pick, the guy that I thought was worthy of the number 1 pick.
Is it just a coincidence that he's starting to play better now? He's starting to find his shot. He's starting to play with more confidence now that his dad is not around, is not out of town. We haven't heard from him. He's busy.
Totally coincidental.
You sure?
Well, how can we prove it?
We can't.
Well, why do you think it? Go ahead, explain.
Because it's about practice. The kid was playing good before he got hurt.
Yep.
He was doing some elite things. NBA shooting was, does he have to change his shot? The Lakers had decided, no, he doesn't have to change his shot. So now it's a matter of repetition. You have more time to practice on the court in NBA, especially when you're a younger player. Not actual NBA practice time, but the time that the assistant coaches are able to spend. We knew his body would get more mature at the end of his rookie year going into his second year. We've seen Ben Simmons been able to develop because just having that extra year to put some pounds on your body and get your body NBA ready. So his shot and being able to practice it and have confidence that I don't need to change my shot, but I just need to be able to make the shots that I'm giving, that right there has nothing to do. And we have to make sure that with this kid that we give him credit when it's due, and when the criticism, make sure the criticism is on him and not on other people. So right now, let's give the kid credit. It has nothing to do with other people.
And Cece, you said, how can I prove it? I think I can prove it, that it has nothing to do with the dad. The two most controversial things the dad has said. One was about Luke Walton, the head coach. He said that in the midst of him struggling. The other one was recently when the dad said Lonzo's not going to re-sign with them if you don't bring in LiAngelo or LaMelo. That didn't throw him off at all. Like, it is a regular progression. By the way, a couple rookies we don't talk much about. Josh Jackson, the 4th overall pick in Phoenix. What has happened to him the last month and a half? He has played better basketball. De'Aaron Fox, the 5th overall pick, I believe. What has happened to him the last month and a half? He's played better basketball. Lonzo has had a spotlight on him, unlike any of these other guys, understandably, but I don't think it's about the dad, good or bad.
Lonzo was healthy before the All-Star break. Their management decided not to play him, so he had an extended rest. The dad and the family were in Los Angeles for the All-Star break. Right. So after the All-Star break, he has played well. So the dad was around. So I give credit to the kid. I prefer to talk about the kid, too, compared to talking about other things. The story is the kid's playing great, and that's what we should focus on.
They've won the last 8 games that he's played.
I'm Jenna Wolfe, and thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Make sure to subscribe and tell your friends, family, and coworkers about the podcast, which, by the way, is available on iTunes and all your favorite podcast apps. You can catch a fresh new episode every Monday through Friday on FS1, starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 a.m. Pacific. So long, everyone.